Hello and welcome to this edition of Own the Journey, where we get to speak with incredible business people from around the world. Today we're at the 417 Think Summit, and today we get the pleasure of speaking with Julie Swift with Julie Swift LLC. So thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So for those that don't know your history, tell us just a little bit about what you do and where you've come from and what you're passionate about today.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I've spent all of my career in the food industry.
Yeah.
And the last 30 years in the food service industry. The first 15 years in marketing and the last 15 years in sales and executive leadership, as well as on an inaugural DEI board for a big, huge CPG company. And so it's, I'm a jack of all trades and master of none when it really comes down to it, but I've enjoyed every step of the way. It's been great.
That's amazing. So when you think about all the things that have shifted and the trends, I mean, getting into food service is tough.
Yeah.
What advice would you give people who are trying to break into the industry and stand out?
Yeah, I you know what, I think that I almost always get asked that question, and it's a really good question because that answer changes based on the climate. What you just said, right now it's tough.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you, the food service industry, it really hasn't been. It has had 40 straight years plus of growth. Growth in jobs, growth in top line sales. I mean, it is, I think, a $240 billion industry that employs, all of these great and diverse people. So the best advice that I have is that put your whole heart in it. Yeah. If you're really enthusiastic about getting into that industry, then really think about, what do I want this journey to look like? And absolutely own it. Own the journey.
Own the journey, yeah. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Well, when you see business owners start out, you have to, it's got to be just a little bit for you who's been in the industry for so long. I'm sure you see like a train wreck in slow motion sometimes.
Oh my gosh.
Talk to us just a little bit about some of those woes or those challenges, those common mistakes that people make.
Yeah. So I think the biggest mistake that I see my clients make, and by the way, I've been in my own consulting business now for the last year. Okay. So I spent the vast majority of that time working for a big, huge manufacturer, the French's Food Company, which eventually became McCormick, and then the last 4 years working for Advantage Solutions. So I've been in my own consulting business about a year.
Oh, wow.
And
congratulations.
Thank you. And in this consulting business, the thing that I see happen over and over again with companies is that manufacturers come to me and they're either stalled in growing or they're in transition. So they're transitioning from maybe one sales representation company to another, but they can't really see because they've been inside this vortex for so long that they can't really see. And so when they hire me, it is to get to what they can't see. But the minute I start laying that out for them, you hear things like, and I'm sure that you'll relate to this, like, we've tried that. Oh, Joe will never approve that. So I just let them go, and then I write down all the reasons, and at the middle of that meeting, I roll it over and I say, this is why you're stalled. Yeah. This is why you're not growing, because you have these set of ideas. So then I start peeling it back and say, okay, so you mean to tell me if you went to Joe and showed Joe a way to get this much more growth and this much more profit, that Joe would say no? And they're like, oh. It's like, hey, you know what? If Joe does say no, that's his prerogative, but make him tell you no. Yeah. Make him tell you no. Challenge it. And then I think I always call them like potholes or dust bunnies, like that are sitting around that you just don't see. And if you're getting ready to sell your house and somebody comes in, they'll go, what's that pile of junk? Yeah. And you're like, what pile of junk? That's always been there. Yeah. So it's that. It's having a different vision on it and really being able to see more than anything what's holding them back. Yeah. Because I don't want to come and solve, I don't have a magic wand or a crystal ball. Right. I want to really solve what's going on with them so that they can be ready to solve for the future. If I walk out of there and they're still making the same mistakes they were when I walked in, then I haven't done my job.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure that a lot of what you do is helping people to get unstuck, helping them to see, kind of see the obvious sometimes, if that's even, yes.
That's exactly it. And, you know, some of them call it getting unstuck. I had a CEO tell me about 3 weeks ago. I'd been working with them since last July. And we were on a Zoom call. And he said, you know, Julie, if you need to pick up a 2x4 and hit us in the forehead, I want you to pick it up.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, since you mentioned that.
By the way, let me get my board.
I've been waiting for the perfect opportunity to tell you, this. But when I start a consulting gig like that, one of the things that I get up front is like, look, here are the 4 or 5 things you can expect from me. Here are the 4 or 5 things I expect from you. And I actually work that into my statement of work.
I love that.
That way there's no
gray.
No
100%
gray.
clear.
No gray. And so, part of it is that I'm probably going to make you tell me no. I'm probably going to push you to your level of uncomfort or discomfort somewhere in this process. And once we get there, we'll high five, because that's where we really need to be.
That's perfect. I love it.
Yeah.
So a couple of different questions that come from that. I mean, in our organization, I call it like shouting out the obvious.
Yeah.
But sometimes you're in the day-to-day so much you can't even see it. And so what you're doing is you're kind of challenging that status quo, helping people to see what's obvious when you get in there from your perspective, but to them, it's like they've got the blinders on.
Totally.
So I totally love that. What made you go from working for really large corporations to running your own consulting business? I mean, that's a big jump. That can't be easy. I know it's not easy. So, tell us about that decision.
Boy, did you ever hit on a nerve?
Oh.
How long is this segment? So it came down to something very simple for me. From my talk that I am a huge champion and really an accelerator for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the corporate world. So I spent about 30 days really thinking about what I wanted to do. And at the beginning of that 30 days, the last thing I wanted to do was start my own business. And as every day ticked by, and I started thinking about what I really wanted to accomplish in the next few years, it just kept pointing back to starting my own business. And a lot of the things on the list of, I will no longer put up with this, those things were around DEI. Those were around having a seat at the table but not having a voice in the room.
Oh, wow.
Those were around, spending your entire life to get into a senior or executive leadership position only to be squashed down.
It's timing.
Yeah, and I think, look, anytime you are marginalized in your work environment, the food service industry is a very male-dominated industry, that the trajectory is going to be steep. You go into it actually knowing that. But I don't think I expected it to be straight up.
Yeah.
I really don't. So I think, you do come to a point where you say, my values and what I believe might not match this company's values. And that's okay. They're entitled to have their own values, and I'm entitled to have mine.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I came to. I sort of came to an impasse. And during that time, I decided to, because it's such a male-dominated industry, I decided to stand up an organization, a nonprofit called Food Service Women's Alliance. And I just stood that up in January. I have a board of 11 amazing women that are joining me here, and it's all about driving gender equity in the food service arena. And, also leading into that in the beginning of it to really think about people of color and women of color. Because if we don't go there with intentionality on the front end, that became a huge priority to us as we stood ourselves up as a board. Because if you can solve for women of color, you solve for everybody. But if you just solve for white women, it's a statistical fact. White women don't bring women of color along. They just don't look at it that way. And so this collective has been my love child
Yeah.
as a part of this journey. And we are, I think, 127 members inside
Wow.
of 90 days.
Yeah.
It's off and running.
Yeah.
It's doing great.
Well, congratulations on both
Thank you.
sides.
Thank
That
you.
is quite amazing.
Thank you.
Tell me a fun story about, I mean, in that nonprofit and maybe even in the business, you had to have changed some lives already, like turned
Oh,
somebody
wow.
around. Tell me a good story.
Oh, wow. You know, one of the things that made me want to set up this collective was that I do a lot of interactivity in social media on LinkedIn. That's your B2B
Yeah.
forum, and so that's where I do a lot of mine. Hardly a week would go by that I didn't have 1 or 2 or 10 messages in my instant messaging based on the kinds of things that I was posting that would ask, Julie, I just found out that I'm paid 25% less than my male counterpart in the same role, and I've been here 3 years longer. Every performance review has been exceeds expectations. I just don't know how to have this conversation with my boss.
Yeah.
So that story stands out to me because that is a super easy fix. And it felt like a huge burden, and it felt like a huge problem to this
Yeah.
individual. So to be able to solve for that and in a few minutes give her exactly what she needed to go solve that, she, by the way, is now making parity with her male counterparts.
I'm sure she
So,
is.
and she didn't have to get mad to do it.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Well, they're starting to come in, so we're going to have to wrap up as we
Sure.
do. Tell us some of your favorite advice that you've ever received.
Oh, wow. My favorite advice that I've ever received, that is so easy. Be you.
Be you.
Do you.
Yeah. Well, I can see that you do that.
Thank you.
Well, congratulations.
Thank
for
you.
owning your
What a
journey.
pleasure.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.